Hey, what's up guys? So I recently got back from a road trip. You see, my brother just got married, and so my family and I all drove down to Oregon to celebrate with him for his wedding. And for the drive itself, I ran two different detector setups. On the way down, I ran the Uniden R8 paired with an iOS app, V1Driver. This app in beta is adding support for the R8, R4, and Radenso DS1. For those of you guys who are running these detectors and have been looking for an iOS version of the app, well, this app is in development. It's not quite available yet, but I want to go ahead and give you guys a preview as far as some of the new features that are coming and what we can expect here. Now, on the drive back, I ran the Valentine 1 Gen 2 with JBV1. It's kind of my go-to road trip app. I learned a lot about this setup as well, and kind of toward the end of the video, after we focus primarily on the V1Driver stuff, new features and benefits and whatnot, then we're also going to be touching on some of the V1 stuff as well. And so with that said, let's go ahead and dive right into it. Alrighty, so to start off, we're going to begin here first with V1Driver. Now, as the app's name implies, V1Driver is designed for the Valentine 1. There's both Android and iPhone versions, but the iOS version is now having support added to it for the Uniden R4, R8, and Radenso DS1. Now, again, this is still only in beta. There's still a lot of work that's being done here. It's not yet available for public release. I'm not sure when it's going to come out, but if you want to download it and kind of tinker around with the beta, toward the end of the video, I'll talk about how you can get access to it. But in this video, I kind of want to run through some of my favorite features and benefits now that I've had a chance to run it for a good little while here. So the first feature that I like is the auto mute capability. Basically, the idea is after a couple seconds, you can have the app automatically mute your detector for you. I like this in situations like if you're driving on the highway and some of your normal filtering options like your low speed muting or GPS lockouts are not going to apply. So if you pass maybe a shopping center as you're driving down the highway or a blind spot false or something, after a couple seconds, you can have the app mute your detector for you. And these options are all adjustable, of course. So like, for example, if you go into the app's auto mute and snooze settings, you can see I've got it set up here to auto mute K-band, for example, and you can adjust the timer here if you want to auto mute after 4 seconds or 3 seconds or whatever else. It's just going to go ahead and mute your detector, let's say after 3 seconds like this of getting an alert. Now let's say you've got the detector set up to only auto mute K-band, for example, but you come across a Ka-band alert. If you want to manually mute that Ka-band alert, of course you can just press the button on the detector itself, but another option now is just to tap the app itself right on your phone. This is not a revolutionary new feature or anything, but sometimes depending on the placement of your phone and your detector, it can be more convenient to mute the detector directly from your phone. Now let's say you've got maybe another app running on the phone's foreground, you don't have V1Driver loaded up on screen, or maybe your phone is in the pocket or something. There's another thing you can do. If you've got V1Driver running on your wrist as well, well in that case you can go into the app and at the very bottom here you can see there's the option for the watch wrist mute option, and the idea there is well, you can just raise your wrist like this on your Apple Watch and mute your detector. Obviously you don't have to like look at all the information to see the frequency and signal strength there. You can just kind of do this motion while you're driving, but it's again another way to just mute your detector without having to reach up and press the detector itself. Now normally the detector will kind of unmute itself after a couple seconds or so. If you want maybe longer duration muting, like let's say for example there's a blind spot false in front of you, right? You catch up to a car, you get a blind spot false, maybe it drives up farther away, that falsing stops, but then you catch up to that car again and that falsing resumes. Well, in that situation, there's a snoozing feature, which basically gives you a longer mute latch. And you can have it set to automatically snooze different bands or something. You can also adjust the time for that kind of thing. So I've got it set right here for snoozing for 2 minutes, 120 seconds. So basically some additional muting capabilities here with the app. And speaking of BSMs, if we go back here into the main menu and we go to the mute in the box setting, as you can see, I've got a box set up here for your Mazda CX-5s. That's really pesking annoying BSMs. And I've got it set up here for 24, 123 to 124, basically saying any signals in this frequency range, just go ahead and mute my R8 for me. Doesn't matter kind of the signal strength or any of that kind of stuff. Basically, any signals in this frequency range, typically your Mazda CX-5s, just go ahead and mute them. You'll still see it on screen, of course, but it's going to give you that audible mute. Next, it's a pretty well-known issue that Uniden's implementation of auto lockouts is not great. Now, no detector has amazing built-in auto lockouts. Typically, all the apps are going to be better than all of the built-in auto lockouts, but with Uniden's, yes, there's definitely some known issues here with that. Now, that said, V1Driver, it has auto lockouts built in, so if you want, you can have the app helping automatically learn your false alerts as you drive around and then mute your detector for you. Now, something I've noticed sometimes is like, sometimes there'll be some weird conflicts with having both the detector and the app trying to handle muting. For example, I found one situation where like the detector tried to automatically lock out a signal, but then right afterwards the auto mute from the app kicked in and muted the detector for me. And it was a little weird to see both the detector auto lock out the signal and then the app mute the R8. It didn't actually affect any of the muting stuff. I don't see anything with like the app accidentally unmuting the detector when it's trying to mute it or anything. But either way, you can have the app helping with your auto lockouts as well. Another thing I like is how the app can help if you first start your car up in, let's say, a shopping center parking lot. In that situation, there could be a lot of falses around you from door openers, but it may take a couple seconds for the detector to actually get a GPS lock. And so in that situation, the detector is going to go ahead and start alerting before it can get the GPS lock, and so your low-speed muting and lockouts and all that kind of stuff can kick in. Well, usually phones do a better job of getting a quick GPS lock, and so in that situation, you can have your phone mute your detector before the detector has a good GPS lock. Additionally, it can also help in situations where you don't have a GPS lock at all. Let's say you start up your car in a parking garage, no GPS lock, but there's K-band falses around you. In that situation, the detector can help keep the detector quiet too. And to check that out, if we go here to the very top where it says Savvy Settings, we'll tap on that. That's going to give us all of our low-speed muting type stuff. You can see at the bottom there's an option here for Savvy Warm-Up. That's basically going to give us like 2 minutes of low-speed muting effectively when we first start up our car and start up the app, if there's no GPS lock. So again, you start your car in a parking garage or something, you don't get a GPS lock, it's going to assume you're traveling at low speed and just mute your K-band signals for you. Again, assuming you've got it set up here just to mute like your K-band stuff and whatnot. And then while you're out driving, you also get this really cool kind of visual display of the signal strength over time. Like in this example here, if you take a look at my phone's screen, you can see the signal strength, how it started to get stronger and stronger at first, but then it started to ramp back down as things like hills and whatnot were getting in the way and blocking the signal. Then I kept getting closer to the officer and the signal started to ramp back up again and get really strong. Then, of course, eventually I see the officer, I pass him and whatnot, but you can see that whole thing kind of mapped out for you on the face of the app. And then as you're driving around, you can have your phone set up to log all the different encounters. Here's all the encounters from my trip, and if I want to filter and have it just to display Ka-band alerts, for example, you can see all the alerts here. Now, something interesting here with the R8, I think I only had about 3 legitimate encounters on Ka-band. I also had a couple false alerts as well. They would typically be weak blips on 33.8 or 35.5, for example. I'm not sure exactly like which ones are legit or false, but if we take a quick look here, you can see I've got some 33.8 ones. It'll show me the location, the time, all that kind of stuff. Some of them will be around 35.5. Some of these are real, some of them are falses. I did experience a number of falses here with the R8. I had the Ka filter turned off. You can turn it on to help knock some of those out, but I did experience some of them here with the filter turned off. Next, as far as some of the downsides and current issues, the main one actually has to do with the Bluetooth implementation itself in the R4, the R8, and the DS1. You see, the way the detectors are actually announcing themselves, they don't do a good job of actually letting apps know that like, hey, I'm here and you can connect to me. And so for that reason, the apps are currently having issues getting connected to the detectors in the first place. And up to this point, V1Driver's had some issues connecting to the R8, whether the app is foregrounded or backgrounded. I can go into the app and even say like, hey, go manually connect to the R8. Because you're not able to do it automatically. And I would really like to see, of course, the ability to just get in the car and drive the way we can do with the V1s, but with the current implementation of what's built into these detectors, that hasn't been the case. Now that said, right before I shot this video, the developer of V1Driver MSW logo kind of showed a demo connecting to the Radenso DS1 to where he's actually got the app set up now and able to connect to the detector even if the app is not running in the background, it's closed, anything like that. He can still ensure that the phone is able to connect to the detector and that the app can connect to the detector too. Again, this is all still very much beta testing and stuff that's in development. We'll have to see what it's like once everything comes out to the public. But I think the main thing at this point is just this information has kind of been provided over to Uniden, and I think they need to make some improvements to how they actually communicate their Bluetooth presence with other devices around, such as different phones and apps. Hopefully they improve it, of course, but in the meantime, app developers are kind of working on some workarounds to deal with the current implementations of Bluetooth in these detectors. And then something else to note is that in the app right now, all the display and audio stuff, it's really geared towards the Valentine 1 itself. Right now, the focus, of course, is like on functionality, getting all the features to work and work properly and whatnot. And then afterwards, once that all stuff is dialed in, then you can go in and have the display stuff be representative of your R4, R8, or DS1 or something. So not a big deal, but maybe just something quickly to mention. Now, as far as when all this stuff is going to be finalized and ready for public release, we don't know that yet. Again, this is just kind of a preview as far as some of the stuff that's currently involved and being worked on in beta. Now, if you'd like to kind of tinker around with the beta stuff, you can actually do that now. You're going to want to, of course, go to the App Store and purchase a copy of V1Driver for your iPhone. Then you can head on over to RDF and send a private message to MSW Logo, the developer of V1Driver. You let him know your email address, and then he's going to give you access to download a beta version of V1Driver. Then once you've got the latest version of the V1Driver beta, the pairing process with the detector is actually pretty straightforward. So you can see right now that it says that it's not paired. The whole pairing process you can just do right here from the app. So we're going to go over here to Settings. We're going to go over to Bluetooth. and then we're going to make sure that this Uniden and Radenso switch is turned on. By default, it's turned off just for V1s, and you can turn it on here if you're going to be using a Uniden or Radenso detector. Then we're going to head on over to the detector here. Same process for all the different ones. We're going to want to make sure that Bluetooth itself is turned on, and then we're going to go over to this Bluetooth pairing option. We'll enable that. You're going to see a code here, R4 at 58, and then it just immediately pops up right there. Same code, R4 at 58. We'll hit pair, and then it's just going to go ahead and pair with the detector. You see success, and then that's it. Really straightforward. Now right here, you can see that it's got a little B for Bluetooth, letting me know that I'm now connected. And now if I go back into the app, we can demo some alerts, for example. Go ahead and trigger K-band. You saw that it actually muted immediately for the low-speed muting, which is really nice because the detector itself doesn't actually have a GPS lock right now. However, that low-speed muting is actually being done immediately here from the app, which is really cool. Additionally, if you got something like, let's say, Ka-band here, boom, same kind of thing here. We can have the muting being taken care of from the app, and you can just tap to mute manually yourself as well. And now that we've covered V1Driver and the new stuff that's coming out here for the Uniden and Radenso detectors, let's next switch gears and take a look at the Valentine 1 Gen 2 with JBV1. It's kind of my go-to road trip setup. JBV1 especially, that app, I was even running it in standalone mode when driving with the R8, but again, for the trip back, I was running with the V1 Gen 2. Now, driving home, there happened to be a lot more law enforcement out, so I had a lot more encounters here with the V1 than I did with the R8. That said, I also noticed more KA falses with the V1 than I did with the R8 too. And typically they would be some like weak blips around 33.8 or 35.5-ish. Now one of those alerts was on the high end of 33.9 or so, and the detector actually did throw a J out, saying this was a junk signal. Definitely not a legitimate alert, so it kind of throws a J out, and you can see it in the JBV1 logs. And to help deal with some of these, when I got back home, I turned on custom frequencies to kind of like KA narrow, sort of narrow down the range of frequencies to just sort of like legitimate police radar frequencies. I also noticed sitting in traffic, the detector would start giving me false alerts to 34.7, kind of like weak blips again. And then it also later recognized these were falses, would throw another J out, even for these signals, and these were right in legit police frequency ranges. And so I do like the custom frequency option here in the V1, but it doesn't seem to eliminate the KA falses. Again, the R8 does have a KA band filter to deal with them. It doesn't fully eliminate them, and it does affect range a little bit, but you do have some control with that. With the V1, it seems like you've got more KA falses, and there's no options to like adjust the filtering. Now, talking to people online afterwards, it seems like some people are reporting similar levels of falses between the R8 and the V1. Other people are kind of more of like what I've been seeing with more falses on the V1 than the R8. Your mileage may vary. For those of you guys watching, if you'd like to share your experiences, feel free to share in the forums or down in the comment area of this video as well. Now, as far as the K-band falsing, I was first running it in logic mode, kind of the little L, and I was getting way more falses than I was used to. And so for that reason, I switched over to advanced logic mode with the big L, and this definitely helped to quiet down the detector, kind of more in line with what I would see with things like the Unidens and the escorts, for example. That said, I would still see some falses that I'm not used to from some of the other detectors. For example, the V1 would false to your Acuras. The other detectors have like K-blocks and K-notches built in to help deal with those. With the V1, you're going to be more reliant on the apps. Additionally, I was seeing a number of false alerts to semis with the V1, something that I don't really experience with like the Unidens or the escorts, for example. So overall, I think the K-band falsing is also a little bit worse than maybe some of the other detectors. And then finally, as far as JBV1, I learned a really important thing that I really wish I would have known before I left to drive back home. You see, for the drive itself, we basically just put the kids in the back of the cars to put them to bed around like 7 p.m. or so, and then just drove straight home, getting home a little after 1 a.m. So hopefully they would sleep in the car, right? Just trying to keep everything kind of quiet. Unfortunately, I ran into an issue with the V1 where like I just could not get the thing to stay quiet, and kind of the K and KA falsing that I was experiencing would kind of compound it. You see, the way like the detector would false, let's say to KA band, it wouldn't always just false to like one signal. Sometimes I would get multiple bogeys, like let's say 4 bogeys. So like it would false to KA or even legit, whatever. I would just mute the signal, but then like another bogey would come up and mute, and then another one, mute, mute, mute. So I like keep trying to like fight the detector to just get it to stay quiet. Or sometimes like it would false to 33.8, but then it would switch over to 35.5, and I would get like frequency bouncing and stuff. Just weird behavior here out of the detector. And I was like, okay, well, let me just reduce the volume of the detector. Makes sense, right? However, I've got JBV1 set up to like control the detector's volume for me. I'm like, okay, well, every time I try to adjust the detector's volume, well, it gets overridden here with the app, so I need to go into the app and adjust it from here. However, if I go into the app's volume level options here, there's some sliders to adjust the detector's volume, but they're not adjustable. And I was sitting here playing with it like I cannot get the detector to quiet down and to lower its volume. I didn't find out until afterwards, like actually right before shooting this video, playing around with it a bit more, that if you hit this button here to turn off the detector's automatic volume controls, then you can go in here and like control the detector's volume. So I really wish I would have known that before, because I couldn't get the detector to stay quiet. My solution otherwise was just to do this and basically mute the V1 altogether. And if you take a look at the top of the app now, you can see that red banner. I got it running like this, but it basically says like the V1's volume is turned off altogether. This was the only solution I could find at the time to keep the detector quiet, and the K&K falsing definitely made this worse. So I guess just a heads up. I'm not exactly sure why you have to have this turned off in order to be able to adjust this stuff, but if you've got the auto volume turned on, you can't actually go in and like adjust any of these sliders. So definitely an annoyance. However, after talking things over on the forum so I could learn a little bit more about the design and implementation of the app, well, in a surprise to basically nobody, because John Boy's amazing like this, in the next version of JBV1, he's actually going to be adjusting this volume slider to give us the ability to adjust the auto volume on the fly. And so luckily, moving forward, this should no longer be an issue. I guess as far as V1Driver then, finally, like that's the main point of the video and the main thing that I wanted to share. It's available in beta. You can download it and access the beta if you want. But otherwise, you can wait for the full release. A lot of the stuff is still in development, but it's adding a lot of really nice features here to the R4, the R8, and the DS1. I'm really glad that MSW Logo is working on that and giving us our first iOS app that should support these detectors. And I'm also hopeful that Uniden can maybe listen to some of the feedback and hopefully release a firmware update for these detectors to improve the way the Bluetooth functionality works and improve then what the developers would be able to do with their apps. But with that said, yeah, good trip. Glad to be back. Excited to get back to our regularly scheduled programming. And so with that said, thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are doing great. And I'll see you in the next video.